The year was 2002. The date? Shit! May 3rd. Shit! The date was May 3rd, when the apostles of Raimi and Arad brought us the greatest cinematic achievement to ever grace the screens of America and all over the world. And the name of that cinematic achievement was known as the adjectiveless Spider-Man. I don't know how any of these fuckers in the movies do the mask thing. This thing sucks. Hey, that might be a slight exaggeration, but you get the point. This movie had a huge impact on not only the way that blockbusters were made at the time, but just the way that superhero movies nowadays are made. If it really wasn't for this movie, we really wouldn't have this big comic book movie boom that we would have now. And some may say that, well, X-Men came out about 2 years before this, so that has more to do with the whole comic book movie boom now than this does. And yeah, it does have partial responsibility with the whole comic book movie boom now, but in my opinion, it really started with Spider-Man. X-Men got sort of the gears turning, but this is really what made comic book movies what they are today, at least in my opinion. Especially because X-Men at the time was taking a more serious tone and a more serious note compared to the comic books, like not having them be in their really crazy, ridiculous colored costumes, where this took a more comic booky and campy approach, not in a bad way, but just the way that it reflected the comic books in a respectable way, and really wasn't afraid to be a comic book movie. So that my whole opinion on that matter may be biased, and in fact, my whole opinion on this movie may be a little bit biased, seeing as how, well, I watched this movie way more than I did any of the other X-Men movies, or really any other superhero movie at that time. Spider-Man just so happens to also be my favorite comic book character of all time, also favorite superhero of all time, and one of my favorite characters just period. So yeah, my opinion on this movie and my opinion on that matter may be a little bit biased, but I will try very, very hard for them not to sound as biased as they may be. I'll try to explain my points in this movie thoroughly and why I enjoy this movie as much as I do, and why, in my opinion, it's aged gratefully. Even though it came out almost 20 years ago, more specifically like 15 or 16 years ago, it still really holds up today. It isn't bogged down by any pop cultural trends or anything else that was really popular around 2002. Easily one of the best aspects of this entire movie is just its sense of earnestness and innocence, and that is due in part to Tobey Maguire's performance, which I'll get into in a minute, but it's also just because of how the movie was made at the time, or at least the mindset the studios had at the time compared to how they have them now. Like I said, the movie came out way back when in 2002, so the idea of a Marvel Cinematic Universe, or a DC Cinematic Universe, or a Ghostbusters Cinematic Universe, or a Transformers Cinematic Universe, which by the way, those last two are fucking stupid, wasn't really thought of at the time. So the only mindset that the studio had at the time regarding this movie and a lot of other comic book movies was just to make a good movie. And if those movies were successful enough, or if they made back enough money, or if people liked them enough, they would just make a sequel. There wasn't any sequels planned beforehand before the movie even came out. So it was just made to be a good movie. You know, kind of the way that movies should be fucking made now. Hint, hint. Like I said, the movie's tone is carried and beautifully helped by Tobey Maguire's performance in the movie, which, just as a side note, I think Tobey Maguire gets way too much shit for these movies nowadays. Especially when the new Spider-Man movies are coming out, the Mark Webb ones with Andrew Garfield. He was getting so much shit for these movies. And like his Peter Parker in these movies, his version of Peter Parker in these movies, is the way that Peter Parker should be played. You guys have to remember that Peter Parker, since he was a little kid, was raised by a geriatric aunt and uncle. So already, right off the bat, he's going to stick out like a sore thumb. He's not going to really stick into any social trends. He's really not going to blend into the crowd or anything like that. He's going to be a little awkward. The scene where Peter Parker goes to cash his check to Betty Brant and just looks at her and says, all confident, I'm a photographer. And she just goes, yeah, I could tell. That's how Peter Parker should act. He should act like a dweeb. He should act weird and awkward. Tobey Maguire plays him earnestly. Tobey Maguire plays him awkwardly. He plays him the way that Peter Parker should be played. He shouldn't be cracking wise and acting like an asshole when he's Peter Parker. He should be cracking wise and acting like an asshole when he's Spider-Man. That's what that character is for. People even argue that, well, he didn't say as many jokes as we would have liked him to, and he wasn't really that quippy. Yes, he fucking was. Just because he wasn't saying a joke every single 20 seconds like Andrew Garfield to the point where it got fucking annoying, doesn't mean he didn't say any jokes as Spider-Man. And even if he didn't, who gives a shit? It's not like the whole movie hinges around that little detail. What about, that's a cute outfit, did your husband make it for you? Or you're telling me that he didn't make jokes? No, he did say jokes, he just didn't say them all the fucking time. Parker should act earnest and honest and goofy and adorable. That way, when we get to see him get a little bit ahead in life, we root for him, and we root for him to do even better later in the movie. But hey, a movie's protagonist is only as good as his antagonist, and in my opinion, the Green Goblin is a great villain. I understand that the character of Norman Osborn in the Green Goblin movie gets a lot of criticism in the sense that, oh, well, he's more menacing and sinister without the costume on, and even with the costume on, he looks more like a Power Ranger and looks absolutely ridiculous, which I agree with the first part. I definitely think that Willem Dafoe is way more menacing than any villain. I do think it's a really shitty decision, however, that they went with the stupid, crappy Walmart mask instead of going with the badass animatronic mask that they were planning on doing. If you haven't seen this yet, go on YouTube or find it somewhere else on the internet. They actually have test footage of them using a animatronic, really menacing, really fucking creepy, nightmare-inducing Green Goblin mask that they were going to use for whatever reason in the movie, but they just decided not to. Regarding the character Norman Osborn in the movie taking Green Goblin out of the equation, I happen to think he actually has a lot of depth that for whatever reason goes really unseen by a lot of viewers. Regarding the character Norman Osborn in the movie taking Green Goblin out of the equation, I happen to think he actually has a lot of depth that for whatever reason goes really unseen by a lot of viewers. You see Norman Osborn almost like a surrogate father towards Peter. Both of them really enjoy science, and even Osborn in the beginning of the movie brings it up to Peter, explaining himself as a man of science, which Peter also happens to be. And why wouldn't Norman Osborn look for an almost surrogate son when his own son, Harry, really wants to have nothing to do with him and has absolutely no idea about anything in the field of science? Also have to remember that he wasn't a complete asshole dickbag before the whole accident with the Goblin gas happened. He actually is a guy who genuinely gives a shit about Peter and wants to be a good guy. The only reason why the whole Goblin thing happened was because he was just trying to salvage his company and make it something more than it was before it went bankrupt or before he was taken off the board. It just so happened to be that that was at the cost of his own sanity. So yeah, in terms of the character Norman Osborn, I think he's a fine character in the movie. In fact, I think he's actually kind of fascinating in some cases. It's the whole part with the Green Goblin where things start to get, well, a little stupid. I won't say he's not effective. Everything in this movie is effective. Everything that has a role does its role fine, and the Green Goblin is definitely no exception. It's just that after he actually fulfills his role, which is killing all the board members which fired him from his own company, he really doesn't have much to do. He kind of just starts fucking with Spider-Man because, well, the movie's called Spider-Man and he needs to fight someone. Pretty much 90% of the goofy, cheesy shit that happens in this movie is almost exclusively and only when the Green Goblin is actually on the screen. I mean, do you guys remember the part where he's chatting up with Spider-Man on the rooftop, almost like they're at the family barbecue? It's really goofy, but it's the kind of goofy shit you really don't see in comic book movies nowadays, so it definitely is welcome, and I'm not gonna lie, I can't say that's not entertaining. Half the reason why I like watching this movie is just for that cheesy shit in there. I mean, it's Sam Raimi. A lot of that cheesy shit is going to be in there, so I just welcome it with open arms. I won't say that Willem Dafoe is not trying his hardest in this movie. He is. Like I said, there's a lot of cheesy moments, and he just loves to ham this up. Every scene that he is in, especially by himself, he's just eating the scenery around him, in a good way, mind you. It's important to note that he also lobbied super hard to play this role, so you can definitely see it in his performance, and he even did about like 90%, or at least a good chunk of the wire work and stunts that went in this movie, so definitely props to him. Easily, hands down, without a hesitant thought in my mind, the one character that steals the show, the one character who has probably less time than the protagonist, the antagonist, and even some of the side characters in the movie, is J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson. Now, I'll say this. I can't see Hugh Jackman not playing Wolverine. I can't see anyone playing that character. I can't see anyone else playing Professor X except for Patrick Stewart. I can't see anyone else playing Iron Man except Robert Downey Jr. And eventually their roles will get replaced. I'm ready for that. That's inevitable. It's just going to happen. But all of them are fucking piss ants compared to J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah fucking Jameson. This scene with this character is an absolute fucking delight. It is probably the funniest scene, hands down, in the movie. And I will say that he does get better in the sequels, especially Spider-Man 2, but he's still just as fun in this. I would not mind seeing him, and honestly, who would fucking mind seeing him come back and do the new Spider-Man movies? He needs to come back as J. Jonah Jameson. I know some people may say that, oh, it's a little reboot, and they already recasted all the roles, so why would they have someone come back from the old movies? It would be too confusing. Yeah, but J. Jonah Jameson is such a minor character, no one would notice, and honestly, who would fucking complain about something like that? I need to see him come back as J. Jonah Jameson. In fact, it's not like he's objected to doing the role again. He voiced him already in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, so he's eager to come back and play the character really at any time possible. So I say bring the fuck back. I can't wait to see him again. Even with this character, you get a little bit of depth. And I know this is a stretch, but it's just a fine detail that I really love to point out to people who haven't seen this movie yet, or really don't know too much about the character J. Jonah Jameson and want to know more about him. It's a scene where the Green Goblin breaks into the Daily Bugle and is looking for the photographer who takes pictures of Spider-Man. He grabs Jameson by the throat, lifts him in the air. As far as we know, he's about to kill him. Goblin asks who the photographer is who takes pictures of Spider-Man, and he just says, and he knows who takes pictures of Spider-Man. It's Peter Parker. It's no mystery. He knows this already. And he just says, no, I have no idea who he is. He sends his stuff in the mail. I have no idea who this is. Knowing that he's probably about to fucking die. Peter Parker is right there in the room. He could easily just say, oh yeah, it's that guy right there. That's who you want. Don't kill me. Especially after what we've seen him say and do to Peter Parker earlier in the movie. He's a loudmouth. He's an asshole. But in this scene, we find out he actually has a heart of gold. Is it because he sees a little bit of himself in Peter as this, little guy who's working for a big newspaper and photography company? I have no fucking idea, but it's just a small little detail that I love in this movie that perfectly explains this is the character of J. Jonah Jameson. He may be an asshole, he may be hard at times, but he's an understandable guy who has a little bit of a heart of gold here and there. Now that we touched on some of the stuff that I really like in this movie, I feel like I have to bring up the stuff that I really don't like in the movie. The acting and the dialogue, at least in the sense of Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst. I know I just praised Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, but just hear me out on this. Any scene that he has with Kirsten Dunst are awful. They do get better in the second movie, and the dialogue is much better in that movie all around, but for some reason, every single time they speak in this movie, the dialogue is shit, and their acting just shows. And I don't know, maybe they're two actors who, if they don't have a strong enough script, they're just not going to try. But you're actors. You're being paid to fucking act. Try a little bit harder. That said, and with all out of the way, in my opinion, just as a sum up, Spider-Man 2 still holds up greatly, in my opinion. It actually holds up better than most comic book films that came out after this, or even before this. It still is one of the most pivotal moments in my childhood, and one of the most pivotal comic book films that's ever come out, and has done so much stuff for the film industry as well as the comic book movie industry. But not as much, as my opinion, than its sequel, Spider-Man 2.